Welcome to Get Off Zero. If you can jump on to getoffzeropod.com, I've got a bunch of new links actually, and I've rebuilt the website this morning. So there's my Spotify links, and more importantly, the podcast 2.0 links that you can jump onto, and like all the stuff associated with that. Fountain app, obviously, and yeah, all the tags that go along with Amber as well. So if you want free BTC to sign up to Amber, you can do it with the Get Off Zero tag, and I think it's like $10 when you sign up. So it's pretty cool. So I got a very special guest today. I think probably the only other Melbourne-based Bitcoin podcaster. As far as I'm aware, anyway. You might know someone else, Jake, that's doing some of the Bitcoin podcasts. But as far as I'm aware, it's just you and me, which is pretty cool. Yeah, and we've done a podcast before, but I think this one's going to be a little bit different. Did you want to give a bit of a background to yourself, Jake,
Yeah,
and what
sure.
you've been working on, and yeah, kind of where you're at?
Absolutely. So first of all, Kieran, thank you very much for having me on the show. Appreciate it. Second time around. I actually was on a show hosted by a Bitcoiner called Merrick, and Merrick was very kind. He came and gave me some food whilst my baby was very newborn, and he's online as Honey Badger Dabs. So you
Oh,
may
I
have
like
come
it.
across his Twitter profile, but he's based in Melbourne,
Oh,
and
nice.
I've been on his podcast. So I noticed recently he's done a few episodes with people like John Tiernan, who I've also had on the show,
Oh,
who's
cool.
a central force behind the Australian Beef Initiative. I don't know if you've come across that. That's a pretty cool
No.
project that's going on.
Oh,
Basically,
cool.
the decentralization of our food system. So re-empowering farmers to grow with regenerative agriculture and producing, delicious beef. And I recently
Oh, yeah.
bought some beef directly from John with Bitcoin. He's got some cattle that he runs on his friend's farm, a couple hours outside Melbourne. So John
Oh,
was
dude,
recently on
you
on
need to
Merrick's
hook me up.
podcast.
That
So
sounds amazing.
it's really cool, and it's just one of the subjects that is so compelling about Bitcoin. But to answer your question, so uh, wow, where am I at? It's been a big year for me. So it's now December. Um, I'm now the father of two babies. So I just recently, 3 months ago, had a second daughter, which is
Congrats.
very exciting. Thank you.
So cool.
She's been very hard work in comparison to the first. I'm almost a bit kind of bleary eyed just online with you now.
No sleep.
Um, so yeah, I mean, Bitcoin, where to even start? I love the Nassim Taleb expression, ask what's in their portfolio, not what they think. And so let me start with that. I have taken all of my investable assets and I've sold them all and went back into pure cash. And I've then redeployed initially 50% of that into Bitcoin, but now probably looking to have got closer to maybe 70%. Um,
No,
Meaning that
sorry to cut you off. That includes real estate, right? From what I've,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
wow, that's
So when I
awesome.
say investable assets, things that I was willing to sell. So um, there is some. I still have an equity position in a family business that's back in the UK. We make beer. We've been making beer for 200 or so years. They're shares that I inherited from my father, and it's just you just don't sell them. That's just not what you do. So
Right.
that wasn't something that I was ever
It's
going to start
it's not a
selling.
done thing. Yeah, right.
No, no, it's very much the opposite of that. So, very traditional and amazing old business, actually. But I own some real estate here in Melbourne. I own some real estate in London, and I have sold all of it. The London investment
Props.
portfolio was actually sold at a loss. I'd been in that position for 8 years, and I sold at probably a 50% equity loss.
Whoa.
So it's a story of I took leverage in my mid 20s. I'm now in my mid 30s, and the market went against me essentially. So it's a very good example as to what can happen when you take debt and things go wrong.
Hmm.
But I was sat in a position where it's like, whoa, I've learned about this thing called Bitcoin. I have owned some since 2015. It's without any shadow of a doubt the best way of storing value over time. And all of the different attributes you can start to research about why Bitcoin's an important thing. The closer you get to it, the more you want to buy some. So what's true of every Bitcoiner? They think they're too late, number one. And number two, they don't have enough.
Yep.
And I've got that bug, basically. It's like, holy shit, here's an opportunity that has raised its head. I'm very confident about it because of a number of different loopholes of due diligence I've jumped through. Why do I own these properties that they might go up by 10% in a good market per annum. A booming real estate market would be, 10, 15, 20% a year.
Mm-hmm.
Not a 10, 20x potential, right? I mean, they're just an order of magnitude difference in potential capital growth ability. So it was like the most painful thing I've ever done. Your biggest lesson as an investor is your losses. And in this case, I'd made an investment that was a bad investment. It had gone against me, and I'd held it for 8 years. And the paper loss, like at the time, I thought I was basically overvaluing these properties. And now when I came to selling them, I couldn't find a bid. Literally couldn't find a fucking bid for months and months and months. And every
Wow.
month that goes by, interest rates are hiking, mortgage rates are changing, the world's looking closer and closer to recession. Oops, yeah, we're now officially in recession, even though they're giving it another name. Inflation's rampant at 10%. That's the initial CPI. That's not even what the real rate is, right? And you're like, fuck, this is a real problem. What am I going to do? So yes, I have, in the last few months, I've finally sold some properties in the UK that were just an emotional piece of baggage that I've really still got to work through. I made a mistake. You make mistakes sometimes and you have to own that up. But the question was, do you continue to live with this mistake, or do you ignore the opportunity cost that is taking that equity that you still have and putting it into Bitcoin? Here in
Mm.
Australia, typical problem, like growing young family, we're in a property that became too small. And it was like, okay, well, you could carry on owning it, rent it out, rent somewhere different, but then you've still got the headache of owning real estate. And for anyone out there that hasn't ever owned property before, as glamorous or as beautiful as it may sound to own bricks and mortar, and there's no doubt there is something very nice about the how do you say, you can touch it, you can feel it, you can walk around it, you can see what your neighbors are, you can see it, but there's lots of problems with it. You have OPEX issues. You have regulatory changes. You have all sorts of different things that can pop up.
Well,
So,
and to cut you off again, so, you don't in Australia. You can't actually own land. So it all comes under something called Queensland because we're part of the crown.
okay.
So like I have a mortgage here. I'm paying off this house,
Mm-hmm.
but technically it never belongs to me. So the crown
Yeah.
can roll in and say, nope, we need to take this off you and give you nothing for it. And that's because we're not a republic. Like that's the bottom line. So
And
you've
that's an excellent point, Karen. It's
Mhm.
it's it's exactly one of the reasons why you look at the asset that is Bitcoin and you look at the asset that is a house, and you start comparing the different characteristics that you like. It's like, well, what is ownership?
Yep.
And actually, I'd never really asked that question before. And it's just part of what is this Bitcoin rabbit hole. It's incredibly rich and an interesting experience, because owning a piece of paper that a government says you own this square meterage, here's your 200 square meters of land in Melbourne, but only at the behest of me. And frankly, it's one of the reasons I sold. Along comes this COVID-19 pandemic.
Wasn't that
I mean,
fun?
anyone that's still calling it a pandemic is not looking at the facts. It is a scamdemic. Let's be very clear about that. But I was locked in my
At least we
house.
all had a good time, right?
Yeah, no, it was horrible, mate. I felt so,
It
that's
was
how
a
we first
horror.
connected, actually. My wife and I went to a lot of protests when there was all those ridiculous rules about you can't get more than 5Ks, you can only leave your house for 1 hour a day, you're not allowed to see your friends and family, you've got to wear a fucking mask.
Mm.
And so we went to these protests, and I had a sign that said, "You want freedom, buy Bitcoin." And that's
Yeah,
how we
that's
first
where I
came
saw you
across each
first on
other.
Twitter. I'm
Yeah.
like,
And
I
I
need to
still
talk to
stand by
that
that. Yeah.
guy.
So
Oh,
where am I
what,
at? I'll
what,
just summarize for you, Kieran. So basically, yeah,
if I
December
could jump
2020.
into that
No,
point
go on.
though, sorry, you're talking about your wife there with that. Like, how has she been with the idea of not having real estate and going all in on BTC? Because that's a big point of contention for a lot of couples. Is
Well,
she totally on board?
I'm not all in Bitcoin, in that I still have a cash position and I still own some equity in a family business. So
Mm-hmm.
my portfolio is not 100% Bitcoin. Would I choose to make it that if I could? Potentially, potentially. But I do think there are places you can have your money for different reasons other than Bitcoin. So you don't have to have 100% Bitcoin. You can have it wherever the fuck you want, frankly.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it took a bit of persuading, I must say. But the reality is, when you rent somewhere, you can rent a nicer property than what you're currently able to afford to buy. And so how I look at it is, okay, our short-term burn rate is going to go up because I'm going to have to, spend thousands of dollars a month on rent to home a four-person family. But if I spend, like, let's say 4 years worth of rent is $400,000, just for sake of argument. Okay. Well, you have a $2 million house, you sell for 2 million bucks, you take 400 grand, you put that in, a Westpac account, and you say, right, this is my rent for the next 4 years. You take 1.5 million bucks and you chuck that into Bitcoin, you keep 100 grand to spend over the next year. What's going to happen? Well, you've got a very good chance of a double, if not, a 10x.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just too good an opportunity to ignore. So imagine if your 1.5 million goes to 10 million bucks in 3 years.
Exactly. Yep.
I mean, and it's not just about that upside potential. It's also then, as you mentioned, it's like, well, what is ownership? You might own this house, but suddenly Daniel Andrews is telling me that I can't leave my front door.
Mm-hmm.
Well, hang on. What do you mean? I own this house. Oh, no, but you don't own the street. We actually had an issue at one point where they put up a COVID testing clinic on our suburban high street road, and there were people queuing outside the front door of our gate trying to get COVID tests, and we had small babies in the house. And we had them for hours and hours and hours and days and days and days. This is crazy.
Yeah.
We're not sick. No one here's sick. But if you are going to be sick, don't stick them on my fucking family's front doorstep. Who's in charge of this? Oh, it's the government. Oh, get in touch with the health department. It was just mind-blowing.
Yeah, mental illness.
Anyway,
it's crazy.
Yeah, well, so now we've got to a happy medium, I think. And, well, just Bitcoin changes you, So yeah, let me wrap up. So 2022, big year, changed a lot of things in my portfolio, started a Bitcoin podcast, decided to quit my fiat mining job. And now I talk to people about Bitcoin online and I make a bit of money from it. I'll hopefully make 10 times more money from it within 12 months from now. And yeah, happy days, mate. It's a very exciting time.
So cool. So cool. We gotta try and figure out the splits on this. So on podcasting 2.0, I noticed your Jake on Bitcoin is on 2.0 and you've got Fountain app as well. So we can do splits for the people that donate to the show. So okay. I don't know how to do it, but let's try and figure it out together.
Sure. No, I'd like to
I've
try.
Never done it before.
I mean, not to poo on a great bit of hustle, because I think there's lots that can be done in the podcasting space. But I found my experience with Fountain so far, I haven't enjoyed it as a user, and so I end up sitting on Spotify and Apple. So I'm not necessarily using it yet. But,
man, really? What?
I love conceptually the concept of how I mean, the idea that you can do microtransactions and you can split them at source to 10% to Bitcoin developers and 40% each for whatever the revenue gained is.
Yeah.
I just found it a bit buggy, and I haven't been able to boost properly, and it just hasn't really worked for me.
Have you had income from people watching the show?
Yeah, I think I've made about $15, $20.
Yeah.
Which is incredible. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not going to shit on that. That's amazing. People
that was the magical part for me. Watching Sat stream in real time. I was like, what? This is incredible. I think
you remind me. I mean, I should revisit it. So
we should. I reckon we should just figure that out together, because that'll be something fun. Even if it's 100 sats or something, who cares? It's still
no. You're right, and it's people like ourselves who are really at the forefront of this revolution in terms of how information is disseminated online in connection with a digitally native currency. This hasn't happened before. That's so. Right. Let's go. Let's try 100%.
Absolutely.
And as an early stage podcast, I would. I'm 50 episodes in roughly, and 6 to 8 months of having a crack, and who knows where it might go over the next couple of years. But the concept of value for value is very interesting.
Oh yeah.
And it helps highlight the incentive misalignment between traditional media, which is basically the advertising model. So what's that mean? Well, you've got people consuming information. The people that create the information, in order to get paid, have a set of customers that advertise with the information, and over time the people paying the bills end up being the most important person in that kind of triumvirate of stakeholders. So just a small example, I have a mate here in Australia who used to work for Channel 9, which is one of the big broadcasting companies here. He was an advertising guy. He'd deal with Coles, the big supermarket chain, and the claim was the news desk was independent to the advertising desk, and so Coles would have Channel 9 have their 7 o'clock news or whatever. But if they ran a story saying Coles is underpaying their employees, guess what happens? Coles calls up my friend at Channel 9 and says, why the fuck have you got this shit story about us?
Yep.
There's just no way that the news desk operates independently from how they make money. It's
Or
absolutely, it just is inconceivable that that's not the case.
or even a closer example to us, really. So you look at Peter McCormick, right? So he's kind of beholden to. See, he does the What Bitcoin Did podcast, which I love. He gets great people on there, and he's a really good interviewer. He's beholden to a lot of companies because that's his model, right? So he's not doing the value for value model. So he's got BlockFi, which has just gone under.
Mm.
Celsius was another one, like a
Did
list of.
Celsius actually sponsor him? Okay.
Yeah. So
Wow.
I actually signed up to Celsius because of him, and I was like, "Oh,
No
this is
way.
awesome! I can I can mine like over
Yeah.
the other side of the world and not worry about it." And then like mine was the first. So had a miner in Oklahoma, and they didn't pay the power bill. So literally, like my place got shut down,
No
and they
way.
they just took everything off. So it's what's the saying? Not your racks, not your sats. So I learned that the hard way. But I harassed them like from the early days, and actually I've got the hardware here, so they actually shipped me one a
Oh, no way.
replacement. So, but
Wow.
I think I'm the only person because I was so vocal and
Most
just
people wouldn't have
tweeting.
bothered doing that. Yeah.
Nah,
I
nah.
mean, to be fair, I had some assets on Celsius. I had some USDC that had recently been some Ethereum that I'd owned since 2017 or something. I was testing out the platform. Frankly, I was like, well, if this yield thing is actually going to work,
Yeah.
that means you don't have to ever sell, which means you don't have to have any capital gains tax exposure. You can
Mhm.
consistently live in debt on your digital assets. Like
Makes
the
sense. Yeah.
idea of it makes a hell of a lot of sense. It's very compelling, which is why I think they grew to like $20 billion under management at some point.
Nuts.
If not definitely 10, which is fucking crazy. Like
Yeah.
traditional financial advisory businesses do not grow to $10 billion assets under management in a couple of years. It just is
Yeah.
impossible.
Red flag.
Um, Interesting. Yeah, there's so much to this market, isn't there? So Peter McCormack led you to Celsius, who've gone under, and that's
BlockFi was one, and the other
BlockFi
one
big for him too.
was
Yeah, I mean,
Celsius was one, and then the Compass was the other one. So Compass was the mining company. Sorry. Um.
I think it's why you just have to be very, very clear as you build an audience that you have, done some due diligence of your own in terms of who
Mhm.
you do business with. So in your case, Amber,
Yeah.
hopefully you've gone and either met them or you've done an interview with them and you've done some time working out who they are, what they're doing. And
Well,
so I, as
Tell
a
you
listener,
I'll tell you the funny story behind that.
yeah, go on.
It's so crazy. So, and I haven't said this on
Keep
air
going, Karen. I'm
before.
just gonna let my dog out. Just keep going.
Yeah, sure. Um, so the night before, me and my friend Chris, I think he's Lung Doge on Twitter. I think we've all tweeted together and gone
Yeah,
back and
yeah,
forth.
yeah.
He's running
Charles.
the Bitcoin Alive conference coming up next year, which
Yeah,
is
I
going to
chatted to you on the phone actually. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, yeah. I haven't met
be
him in
awesome.
person yet, but very excited for that event as well. Shout
So
out to Bitcoin Alive. Well done, guys.
hell yeah! I'm looking for. We'll all have to meet up there for sure.
Yep.
Um, so we had a brainstorm. So I had this idea for a thing called Timestamp, where basically it's a 4 year learning journey for people. So like you're kind of locked into a cycle, and you have to learn like all these like materials along the way. So we had this like whiteboard sesh, like the whole thing, and then we kind of settled on the idea of like partnering with an exchange. And we're kind of going down the list of exchanges together, saying,
Okay.
nah, we can't trust them. Can't, it's all custodial. And we both landed on Amber. So we're like, all right, well, it has to be Amber, right? Because like they use multi sig, like they kind of ticked all the boxes that Bitcoin only, obviously, rah. And then we're like, yeah, cool, great session. I went off to bed, woke up the next morning with a tweet DM from Amber. It's like, what? So we literally went to bed talking about them, woke up the next morning. So Andy from Amber tweeted me and was like, do you want to, watching all your stuff online, do you want to work with us and do a podcast? I'm like, what? This is insane,
Divine
dude.
timing, mate.
Like, what? The synchronicity was like out of control. So yeah, I did my due diligence like before
Yeah,
they
before they
reached out
reached
to me.
out. Nice.
So
Well, the fact
weird.
that they're a Bitcoin only company is a good start.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly right. And the fact that you can do DCA and push it straight out to a wallet, like they don't
Mm.
want you to be like because they don't want to
No.
be custodial. Like that's and that was our main point. Like we need someone who has the same mindset
Mm.
as us, basically, if we're going to build out like some sort of curriculum with that. So yeah, it was so weird how that came about.
Well,
But
and to the to so yeah, so the first point there being is, at least on behalf of the host, you've done some kind of due diligence on who you're working with or
yeah,
for as your
yeah,
customer on behalf of your user, so your audience member. But the second is you have to be very clear, like this is risky. So whatever you choose to do with your money is your choice. That is not
yes,
my choice as the host of this podcast in whatever form you might be. Do you know what I mean? So
that's right.
um, yeah, but that's still that's just about being clear, for those people listening out there, do your own
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
research. 100%.
Exactly, exactly. Now I've got some questions for
Yeah, go for it. Sorry, so it's taken us
you.
20 minutes to get into what we wanted to talk about, but that's cool.
I've got a bit of a format, but I could probably chat to you all night. Um, so before we kind of get into everything, I don't think we got into it in the last podcast, but your Bitcoin origin story is one. But before we get into that, the first time you questioned money, like when that was and how that was and how that sort of came about, if you remember.
I don't remember the first time questioning what money is before Bitcoin. Like, I don't think there
Right.
was ever a time I was like, what is money? Um, I was trained to make money.
Mm,
So, growing up in a family with a family business that, makes beer and runs pubs, every time you drive past one of our pubs, your dad's going, is the car park full? Is anyone in there? Have you made good beer? Is it hot? Are lots of people going to be in the pub garden? You're operating a large business. And the point of that is that you're creating cash flow. And obviously at the end of the year, you want to have saved some of that cash flow and you've earned more than you've cost. That's
mm-hmm.
how you make money. I ended up going to do a business management degree at Leeds University Business School, so decent uni in the UK, and we did marketing modules, we did macroeconomics, microeconomics, maths and stats, pretty general business degree. And I was joking online recently, I don't think Austrian economics was even mentioned
Nah.
as a
Yeah.
as a field. And macroeconomics was fairly simple. The central bank was this kind of god-given right in the center of this whole piece, and it was all about how to um, you know how to spike demand with stimulus of government spending and then try not to let inflation run away, and disposable income and employment and all these different kind of levers that they can supposedly play with. um and that was, again, just like, this is how it works, carry on.
Yeah.
And the mindset at uni, to be honest, is like, let's go get smashed and have a good time and try and get you know I needed to get what was called a 2-1. So you get a first, that's the top grade, and then you get a 2.1 or 2.2. I was like, 2.1 is very, very decent result, and it gets you into a job. So my aim was only ever to get a 2.1, and that's what I did. And so it was a case of like, just get the exam. I didn't really stop and really engage with that question intellectually. It's like, what is money?
Mm.
But I mean, this is where Robert Breedlove comes in, to be honest. So 2020 comes along, and $4 trillion is printed out of thin air. And I'd owned some Bitcoin for 5 years. That Bitcoin was still in the self custody where I'd left it. I'd sold a bunch of it, but 25% was still there from 2015. The markup was an extraordinary return. You're like, oh my God, what is this stuff? It's the best performing asset I've got in my portfolio by a long way. And it just hits you in the face with how important it is. You're like, oh my
Mm.
God, what is this stuff? And you dig down the hole, and Michael Saylor, I never forget, watched a YouTube video with him and Raoul Pal. It's called "When Corporate America Has Bitcoin Infiltrate" or
Oh,
something
I
like
remember
that,
that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
or
Awesome.
"Bitcoin Infiltrates Corporate America." And you
Yep.
get 2 hours of you know, an absolutely extraordinarily smart man who has ticked every box in terms of his past behavior, in terms of proving successful and backing the right horse. And he talked about something that really intrigued me, which was, how do I know that the person running my company 100 years from now has the best opportunity of doing that? I know I'm going to buy Bitcoin. And the guy had
Mm-hmm.
gone and bought $400 million worth of Bitcoin and put it on his balance sheet. And it's a stock listed company. The amount of lawyers that could get in the way, accountants that could get in the way, general regulatory issues. I mean, that was the best piece of due diligence that you could possibly leverage to make a decision of your own.
Yeah.
And boom, down the hole you go. And suddenly you're like learning about Bitcoin. And it's like, well, actually, it's a new form of money. Okay, well, what is money? So, in
Yeah.
answer to your question, in a very roundabout way, I
Yeah.
didn't ever
Yeah.
ask that question until I started really looking into Bitcoin.
Wow. So it was together. Wow. So what year was that? 2020.
Probably, yeah, probably 2 years ago. Yeah, 2.5 years ago.
Wow. Oh, geez, that's
But like, no
amazing.
one, no one asked that question. What? It's just, it's completely um ignored. Let's
Mm,
just take Australia as an example. Like when you grow, like I've got a 2.5 year old daughter, and she plays with notes and coins. And there was a Monopoly board that she got down the other day and started playing around with the Monopoly. And first, it's the dice she's playing with, and then it's the boots, and like all those different pieces of the Monopoly board. And eventually, she lands on the money. She's like, "Oh, money!" And she started stealing the money and running around the corner trying to hide it in her welly boot. And it's this kind of extraordinary thing where you witness, even from 2 years old, humans understand the importance of this thing, money.
yeah.
But what she doesn't understand is Monopoly is just a made up game, and those notes are completely worthless.
Worthless. Yeah.
But
Yep.
take that
Yep.
a step further. Well, you take an Aussie dollar, let's say you get paid $100 an hour for your work. Well, that's what you get for your labor. Little do you know that actually that money is just printed out of thin air by someone that controls the narrative. So
That's
it's
right.
never, ever, ever even a question as to whether or not that money is what is that money. It's God given kind of money. That's how it works. And so in my mind, Bitcoin will create this massive awakening where people ask the same questions that you and I have asked to get to this point. We just happen to have been in a position where I was interested in investing because of an inheritance I've received, and my
Yeah.
father had died young. Like that may not have happened. I may not have been interested in those things. Or equally, I'd been in technology, working in startups, and had understood the idea of exponential growth or network
Yep.
effects, or leveraging other people's due diligence. Like watching Michael Saylor, listening to him speak, I'm like, whatever this guy's doing, he's doing something I need to learn about. And that's something that I picked up angel investing. Now, you don't necessarily know those kind of things unless you happen to have been in those positions. So it's fascinating how there's all these different touch points that bring people to the table. So
Yeah.
again, I've kind of answered your question twice, but in long
No,
story
no,
short, I
that's
never
really
asked the
good.
question, "What is money?" until I came across Bitcoin
So you,
properly.
you kind of
But even then, I
leapfrog.
just don't think we're just not we're conditioned in such a way that that question is never it's never brought up. And that's what's cool about
No.
getting into Austrian economics is Carl Menger was writing about this 150 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Mm-hmm.
this is this conversation that's as old as man,
That's right.
but we just didn't realize it, or I didn't realize it. So shame on me, for not realizing it before now. But
No, man, I mean, so many people in the same boat. But what's interesting is you kind of leapfrogged, well, my journey anyway, of like questioning money being backed by gold, because everyone sort of assumes like the Aussie dollar, USD is all backed by gold, and there was a whole point there where like so for me it was like 2007. There was a film came out called Zeitgeist, so I watched that. I was like, oh, holy shit, money's not backed by anything, like it's worthless. And I was kind of obsessed with that and looking at solutions, and then I finally came across BTC. um
interesting.
Funnily enough, like researching universal basic income, which ironically, I was like, oh, like in my mind, like naively, I thought, oh, the government can just give everyone a miner at the time, like CPU, GPU miners, and then that's a UBI, right? Not thinking it's like the complete inverse of what they want to do, sort of thing.
Whoa.
Although, if you look at Bukele, that's kind of what he's doing at the moment with the miners in El Salvador with
The
the
bonds that they're creating.
all the bonds, but also like the actually giving money out from the volcano. So mining with the
Okay.
volcano and giving it out to people. So it's kind of what.
Interesting. I don't know much about that.
Yeah,
Cool.
it's pretty cool. I've got some friends who've just come back from there, which is pretty cool. But yeah, interesting. You've kind of leapfrogged that to like just questioning money straight up, like with being empowered by BTC. So it's cool.
Well,
It's
I
really
don't know
nice.
if it's like a case of questioning it straight up. It's just that the the lens that I had on Bitcoin was different to like the main question I was asking was how do I beat inflation? I wasn't asking what is inflation.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So, for 10 years I'd been investing and I knew there was a hurdle rate, and that hurdle rate was inflation. If you're not beating inflation, you're losing purchasing power year over year. And so I'd tried a number of different tactics to do that. And when that kind of stimulus is announced, and I think something like 40% of US dollars in circulation have been created in the last 5 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
40%.
Yeah. It's insane.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay. So has everyone's salary doubled? No, of course not. They might not have even gone up. So that person that hasn't had a salary increase in the last 5 years they're able to buy half the amount of stuff. So if they don't understand inflation, they're fucked. Like
Well,
literally fucked.
yeah, exactly right.
It's an
Well,
awful thing to say. Like, but then inflation's transitory. That the messaging is all so evil in
gross.
many
Yeah.
ways. It's
Yeah.
it's it's like, oh, don't look over here. No, nothing to see here. No, 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 not a big deal. We've got your best interests in heart. Oh yes, the governor of the Bank of England. He's a great guy. Have you ever heard about him? I mean, as soon as there was any kind of like hiccup in the pension market, this happened 3-4 weeks ago. Oh look, Bank of England buying bonds. Oh, where have they come from? Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's mad.
Well,
The whole
and like,
system's mad when you really start digging
trillions,
into it.
trillions of dollars of debt. Like a trillion kind of sounds like a billion, but we're never taught what a trillion actually is, right? So if you look at a trillion seconds, you ask someone like, how long is a trillion seconds? People will say, I
I
don't
have no
know,
idea.
a year, maybe, I don't know, like
Go on, what
six
is it?
months, 35,000 years.
Whoa. Whoa.
Right. So it puts it in
Whoa.
perspective, right? Like, but we're never taught that. So it's like, oh yeah, $1 trillion debt. No, that can never be paid back. Like that's it. It's done. So
Yeah.
that's something like, and I ask that to a lot of people, and everyone always says like, oh, is that maybe 2 years? Yeah, no, a bit longer than that. Like,
Whoa. That's amazing.
it's
Yeah.
mental,
Even
eh?
35 years, like 35,000,
Yeah, yeah, mental, absolutely
isn't
mental.
it?
Anyway, moving on because I know you got limited time,
Yeah.
and
Sorry, I've only
I
got
got a
an
lot.
hour. I just want to make one point. There was a recent article I saw of the Australian central bank governor coming out and saying he was sorry to mortgage owners. I mean, it's just laughable, right?
It is.
Anyone that took a mortgage in the last 18 months at rock bottom rates, if they didn't understand why they were able to get such cheap debt, then in some ways, in my opinion, they deserve to just feel the heat.
Yeah.
They got an opportunity, they took it. The rates are going up. Why are they going up? Because the guy that runs the fucking rate book has decided to put it up.
Yep.
And then you get these ridiculous kind of propaganda slant. He's a nice guy. He's sorry. Oh, I never expected to have to do this. Oh, yeah. Oh, really? So what? You were going to give people lots and lots of money, let them go in debt, and then never charge them any interest whatsoever forever?
Yeah.
Come on.
It's gross, isn't it?
Oh,
Really gross.
yeah. It
And
starts to
yeah,
really wind me up. But yeah,
yeah.
and that's the whole point of this conversation. So anyway, quick. Yeah, we've got 30 minutes or so. Let's go through.
All
What's the
right,
next step?
let's go through it. Okay,
I'll end
so
up talking too much.
yeah, yeah, no, me too. I'm exactly the same. Um, so on your journey, and this is probably a no for you, I reckon, but have you dabbled in shit coins at all?
Yep.
Like you
100%.
have? Oh wow, okay. Right.
So, and this is something that I think is quite an interesting subject. So I'm of the opinion that you can do whatever you want with your money.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're buying shit coins, that's completely fine. That's up to you.
100%. Yep, yep.
So that's okay in my book. You do whatever you want. Once you understand what Bitcoin really is, you realize that actually there's very few other things that you could possibly own that outcompete it.
That's right.
Now, there are probably some very specific scenarios in which you could outpace the price action of Bitcoin, which I think is going to be possible. But is that really where you want a large percentage of your portfolio? Probably not, because you're having to take a lot of risk to actually outpace the Bitcoin
That's right.
potential
Yep.
price rise. So just the way that I would look at that is, well, what's the benefits of owning anything else? Well, very, very difficult to beat the Bitcoin hurdle rate. Okay. Well, then why own anything else? And then there's the whole peace of mind side of things. And there is an ethical discussion around, by promoting Bitcoin, you're promoting something that doesn't have a leader. It's rules without rulers. It hasn't changed for 10 years in terms of how it actually functions. And you can actually own this stuff with a multi-sig vault that no one can ever get off you. You can transport it in your head if you need to. And it's just an extraordinary asset. We're incredibly lucky to be born at a time when it was
Oh, yeah.
just starting, like extraordinarily lucky. when it comes to other assets you can own, it's not just shit coins. You could own real estate. You could own classic cars. You could own wine. You could own fucking euros. You can have whatever you want. But are they going to outpace the
Wine's
price of
not so bad, I
Bitcoin?
suppose.
No, but and that's great, right? Have a cellar. People buy wine. They store it for many years.
Yeah, yeah.
That time is valuable to people because they don't want to sit around storing wine and picking certain vintages
That's
and all that
right.
shit. They
Yeah.
go and spend $3,000 on a bottle of wine because it's, an amazing vintage from 15 years ago. Great. But if I sit on this bottle of wine for the next 15 years, is it going to outpace Bitcoin?
No way.
Probably not.
No.
So it then becomes a case of like, well, what is a better way of deploying your capital? And I think it's just incredibly difficult to beat Bitcoin. So I guess part of the journey of getting to that realization, however, included owning many different things. So I have dabbled in shitcoins 100%. The last of them that I will probably ever buy were on Celsius, and Celsius has obviously gone under. So I doubt I will ever get those back.
Mm-hmm.
I did stupid stuff, like I sent 2,000 quid to someone in the UK for an ICO that never happened and never got the money back. I, you know, I've just I've messed around basically. The idea of a quick buck, everyone gets sucked in that form of greed. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yep.
Something I think highlights this really nicely, though, that for people listening out there, if they're wondering, where should I put my money and what's the right way to think about it, the crypto industry is a large one and it includes Bitcoin, but Bitcoin and the rest of the crypto industry are different beasts in the same way that if you were looking to buy an equity, you could be buying an equity in a startup that's a year old. You could be buying equity in a hospital group that's part of a private equity deal, and that's a 10-year-old company with cash flows and ways of valuing it. Or you could be buying equity in Qantas, a publicly listed company. They're all equities, but they're very different value propositions.
Yep.
That's the same way you want to think about crypto. So what is Bitcoin? What is Ethereum? What is Solana? They're all different and they have different properties. And as a result, they can be like looked at in a different way. But a really kind of nefarious incentive model that exists and is possible outside of Bitcoin is the ability to generate a protocol to get funds from insiders. And so let's call it Kieran Coin. Kieran Coin, you could create 100 million of them,
Mm-hmm.
and you could keep 80 million of them for yourself, and you could sell 10 million of them to a venture capital company that gives you 10 million bucks. And you could then sell the remaining 10 million of those coins to unassuming retail buyers who are anywhere in the world that have access to Binance or to Coinbase. And you could spend $2 million on marketing, which means you can have the best looking product that is going to beat Bitcoin for all these different reasons, whether it's more economical or it's actually going to like outpace it in terms of price. All the while, the person that created it was keeping 80% of the value.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they think it's going to hit a nice market peak, they drop the whole fucking lot and run for the hills.
Yep.
And to augment that, you've got media businesses going back to that. So people like Cointelegraph. I've got a friend who works there as a Bitcoin maxi. He's brilliant. Joe Hall, shout out to Joe. But the crypto media business is paid for by altcoins, by shitcoins. And if you can print your own coin and you can spend 2 million on marketing, well, guess where it goes? Well, it goes to the media businesses that generate the content. And so you've got this really perverted incentive to do what the current system does, funnily enough, which is print their own money, give it to their buddies, get their buddies to buy everything on behalf of you, and make sure that the media companies are telling everyone that what's going on is totally fine and don't worry, you're going to make money and be happy.
Yep.
And it's just basically you just got to dig a little deeper.
And
and when you do,
eight lines of code to do that as well. So Solidity, all you have to do is write up 8 lines of code. You can spin up your own token, and then Bob's your uncle.
really,
That's it.
yeah,
Yep.
it's very, very, very
Nothing.
small amount of work, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Ridiculous.
Interesting. And that's where someone like yourself with a more technical background to me has such great insights. Like I don't understand that. I just know that's the case, but I don't understand how it could be done. Yeah, it's very helpful to have people you can trust who have different skill sets and can analyze things for different reasons. And that's a great example of it. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
So yes, the answer is I have owned shitcoins, and I will continue to own shitcoins if I take the shitcoin definition as any other asset other than Bitcoin. Because at
Mhm.
some stage I will want to buy a property to live in. At some stage I will buy a car. At some stage, I might buy a classic car. At some stage I might buy some fucking wine. Why not? At some stage I'm going to have to go to Europe and use euros. At some stage I'm going to need to operate in a different setting, which you need to own different stuff. So I'm not a buyer of this whole you can't buy shit coins. You can buy whatever you like. Just understand what you're buying, and I think you'll be happier for it in that sense.
Absolutely. I like that answer. That was really cool. Um, so moving on, the topics get off zero. So getting off to zero DCA. Do you dollar cost average at all?
No,
No, you're not. Okay,
no.
interesting.
And the reason for that's very personal in a way, and this is the same for everyone out there. Everyone's situation is different, but I come at this as more of a capital allocator type discussion. So
Right,
my
right.
father, bless his cotton socks, he died sadly when I was only 20 years old. He was
Yeah,
48, had a heart attack running our family company. It was awful.
that's awful.
Changed my life, sold the family house that we lived in. And so I received money in my 20s from that process, which is what I've then spent the last 10 years investing and learning about all this different stuff.
Gotcha.
So trying to protect the value I was given as a result of his untimely death.
Yeah, right.
And in my case, right now, I don't generate an income at all, except for a couple grand from my podcast. So I don't necessarily have a monthly paycheck that I am, after I got let the DCA functions brilliantly if you have let's say a salary or a monthly income and you've got a bunch of costs, you've got to cover those costs, the savings you're taking every month, 50%, bang them in Bitcoin. Brilliant. Don't worry about the cost of the Bitcoin at the time. You're just playing the accumulation game. For
Yep.
me, it's more a case of, okay, I own this stuff. What percentage of this stuff do I want to have in Bitcoin? What's a reasonable risk? What's an unreasonable risk? Where do I sit on that scale? And once I've decided that, it's a case of, okay, how do I do it? So I then have to make large buy orders basically. And
Yeah, right.
I then have to try and time the market. So it's a case of like studying the cycles, looking at sentiment. Where are we in the feeding fear and greed index? I've got a great friend, shout out to Jigsy if he ever listens to this, but he's a homegrown talent of the highest order in terms of a technical analyst, and he's
Cool.
developed a system where he looks at a number of different indicators, and when they all converge, is generally speaking an excellent time to buy or an excellent time to sell. So I'm in
Interesting.
constant conversation with him about where do we think is a good place to enter the market. And I mean, to be honest, right now,
Is
unbelievable
I was
buy.
gonna say it's now, right? It
Yeah,
has to
I mean,
be.
I bought some Bitcoin just yesterday, so
Yeah, nice.
um, we might see a 50% drawdown from here. Where are we? $17,000. But even if we did in the next 3 or 4 months, the upside from there, is 20x rather than 10x, whatever
That's
the case
right.
might be. So I'm just not fussed by that. And the
See,
thing I
see?
think that's really cool to get across is that the money that I'm buying Bitcoin with is never going back into fiat.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Now,
Well, and
some of it might, like at cycle top in 2 or 3 years' time, let's say we've had a 10x. Well, I will take some of that value off the table because I need to rent a property for the next 4 years. I need to pay
yeah,
the bills for the next 4 years. But generally speaking, this is what's slowly happening: is the traditional system is not working because you cannot beat inflation with the traditional asset
absolutely.
split of 40% bonds, 60% equities. They've been wrecked. They've been absolutely fucking wrecked. And yet I still end up in phone calls with wealth management companies back in London helping with another set of investments I work on. And they're saying, oh, you can't beat inflation, but we can do 5% or we can do 8%. You're like, well, you can actually. What
Yeah,
about Bitcoin? Oh, you can't do that, can't do that.
yeah.
And it's hilarious. It's like, okay, so you
The
want me to give
a
you
mental
money,
block. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but you can't actually outpace inflation. And everyone told me inflation wasn't going to get bad, and it got bad. And now you're telling me it's not as bad as it actually is, and it's fine to give
It's
them
not
money and
real.
still lose
Yeah.
it. And it's like, no, 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 no. This is not. It's not right for me. This isn't working. I'm out. But the crazy thing is that there's holes in the system. You know, there's value that's actually being taken out, and it's going to Bitcoin. And it could be going other places, but it's extraordinary to think over time that's only going to speed up. And as that speeds up, the printing press is going to speed up. So
Yeah.
the only way these guys can carry on is printing more money. And when they print more money, it speeds up. So the velocity of the speed of deterioration of the system is going to increase. Now, how quickly is this going to happen? We don't know. But the next 10 years, it's going to be absolutely crazy.
It's gonna be. It's so cool to hear you have so much conviction on the BTC protocol, without even you haven't been through a cycle yet. Like
No, well, I
that's
have. So in 2015, I bought Bitcoin.
like 2015. You bought it. Okay, you have. Yeah, yeah, right.
So in 2015, I made a purchase that was a small percentage of my portfolio at the time.
Right. Kind of set and forget,
And
and
yeah,
then
so
came back.
if I wind
Gotcha.
back, so this is now 7 years ago. I bought some Bitcoin in 2015, $450 a Bitcoin. My
Yep.
mate in Singapore was like, Jake, you got to look at this Bitcoin stuff. It's really cool. So I started looking at it. Loved the idea. At the time, you were still having to decipher like what is blockchain. You know, trying to
Yeah.
explain that to other people. And that was 2015. So I held for maybe that was the 2015 bear market, which was miserable. Held for 12 months, sold some because I made a good gain, and took my then girlfriend, now wife, on holiday to Japan, and then decided to
Oh,
quit my
lovely.
job. And we went traveling, and I had, I spent more Bitcoin traveling around South America. I actually ended up in Cuba in 2017, June,
Oh, wicked.
and or April of 2017, and opened my Coinbase account in Cuba. And because Cuba's under sanctions and Coinbase is an American company, my Coinbase got impounded. So I thought my Bitcoin was gone. And that's what drove me to then understand what a Trezor was and move my coins into self custody
That
after
was my
Coinbase
next
actually
my next
released my.
question was that exactly. That's awesome.
Yeah, so that's how I learned. So
Right.
so at the end, and then of course the block size war was happening back in 2017. There was talk about Bitcoin Cash and what was going to happen there.
Hmm.
And I wasn't as close to Bitcoin as I am now, but I was studying it. I had some, and the best way to learn is to own some. Just get some skin in the game. Get off zero. Fucking
Yep.
bang. Let's get the
Get off
title of the
zero.
podcast in there. Get off zero, guys, because it's really important way of learning when you have skin in the game. Like think about when you go to the horse races and there's 22 horses to choose from. They've all got different colors. They've all got different names. And then there's a horse called Jack the fucking Lad. And you go, my money's going on Jack the Lad. Suddenly you've got $10 on Jack the Lad. Jack the Lad's coming around. You go, oh, gosh. But I mean, you couldn't give a toss about this horse. But because you got money on it, you suddenly can. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Um, and so again, 2017 summer block size war, I thought it was all going to end. You're like, Jake, do you know what? You're sitting on a 10x. Fucking sell. So I sold at the time what was 75% of what I initially bought.
Oh wow. Right.
And then I didn't even think about it until, well, basically everything ran to 20,000 a coin. I'm like, oh shit. And for whatever reason, I didn't sell any more. And then I kind of forgot about it.
Yeah. Right.
2019 slips by, 2020 comes along, and then bang, it hits you in the face again. You're like,
Yep.
whoa, Bitcoin's gone up. It's now $20,000
Yeah. Yeah.
again. What the hell's going on here? So I have done a couple of cycles in that sense, but I wasn't taking it nearly as seriously as I am
Yes.
now.
Cycles.
But
Yep.
the
Yep.
conviction that I have at this stage is undoubtedly augmented by those early phases. So that was what really got me. It was like, hang on, so I've owned this stuff for 5 years and it's still sitting there, and it hasn't cost me anything. Like it's cost me
Yep.
nothing to own my Bitcoin, and it's still there. Running a property portfolio is an absolute fucking pain in the ass.
Hmm.
Oh, shower's broken. Oh, I need to leave my tenancy. Oh, actually, your tenants aren't going to leave ever because there's now a pandemic and the government's going to change the rules, and they've got a 12 months no break fee. And
Yeah.
all you want to do is store your value. You don't want to run a small business, leasing properties.
That's right. Yeah.
So it just, I don't know. Yeah, there's lots to that I'm commenting about, I guess. But yes, my feeling is pretty simple. Bitcoin completely revolutionizes what is family wealth management, and forever there is going to be a change for the average person. And by talking about it, I think we can teach more people. And you don't need to own properties. You don't need to own equities. You don't need to own bonds. You don't need to learn any of this shit. You just
Hmm.
need to understand that Bitcoin is a savings tool. And as a savings tool, it's at a very, very early stage. And therefore, the adoption rate is very low. the potential upgrade in adoption is so high that the price is going to shoot from where it is today into the future because the supply and demand metrics are so strong.
Mm-hmm.
And as we touched upon at the start, the idea of ownership is forever changed.
That's
You
right.
own it. You can't move this stuff without me pressing a
Keep it in
button.
your head. Yep.
Correct.
Yep. Exactly right.
So yeah, man, it's life changing.
So what's your hardware wallet of choice? So you mentioned Trezor. Is
Yeah,
that
I'm using Trezor.
still your go to?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I reckon they're pretty cool. I've got pretty much every device, but I
Yeah,
think
well, you,
Trezor's
again, coming from the more technical side of things, you would have checked them all out. But yeah, so I currently have an account with Unchained Capital and a multi-sig set up with a couple of Trezors in different geographic locations. And actually, in
cool.
my case, I employ counterintuitively a financial advisor who has one of the keys, and I
Nice.
actually pay 1% of funds under management in a sense for that service. So
Yeah, right.
when you inherit money, or if you make money and you need to make sure others can inherit it from you, you have a problem. What if you get hit by a bus? How
Yes.
do the people that you want to receive this value receive it? You need to know that it's going to go to the right person. There's not going to be some fucking bitch stepmom that gets in the way, or a pissed off sibling, or like people go crazy when there's money and death. Like people go crazy. They're horrible
Mhm.
to each other and they want to
Yeah.
steal almost. So you have to be very careful. And in my opinion, the inheritance planning problem is now solved because Bitcoin exists. And so
Yes.
you can employ people to help you navigate that process. And that's what I've chosen to do as well. So that's just an extra layer of security. It's like, okay, of the 100% markup from where I see it might going today, I'm going to get 99 and someone else is going to take 1% just to make sure that the 99 goes to the people that need it. If that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, there's another aspect to that as well, or another perspective, I suppose. So the people that die without having some sort of plan to give it to somebody else, they're essentially taking that BTC out of the network and
Yeah.
gifting it to everybody, right? So it's kind of win-win. So if you set it up, awesome. If you don't, everybody else wins at the same time. So yeah,
Yeah.
it does
True.
fix that a lot. It's great.
And that's well, that's so what you're saying is by reducing future supply, that's actually of benefit to other
To
holders.
everybody. Yeah,
Yes.
the whole world. And so
Okay.
everybody gains from that. So it's
I mean,
like
but
even if
I
you
would argue like if you got hit by a bus tomorrow, and you had 10 Bitcoin sitting in an account that someone didn't get, like you fucked up. Do you know what I mean? And not
maybe
necessarily because the 100 grand today that costs is not. I mean, that's a very significant amount of money, but it's also like what will that will become? I mean, it's just insane. So
maybe, but also if you think about it like at the macro, you're essentially helping everyone in El Salvador. So immediately the price and the value of their BTC goes up in
yeah,
value. So all these third world countries that haven't had access to finance before and they've kind of leapfrogged and they do.
yeah, that's
If
cool,
you
isn't it?
drop dead, like you're gifting
Yeah.
it to all of it. It's amazing.
Yeah, that's
So
true actually. So maybe I'm thinking through this in the wrong way. Um, yeah, nice. So actually, that is kind of calming in a way, isn't it? So
yeah,
if you were to get hit by a bus and your kids didn't get what they were supposed to get, well, at least there's been a benefit to the rest of the world, and actually they could buy Bitcoin on that day and they'd still benefit because there's less supply.
that's
Yeah,
right. Exactly
true.
right. It's
Okay.
almost like an altruistic thing to do.
Yeah, cool.
It's a you can't stop up really. It's I've thought about this long and hard. I'm like, yeah, well, if I mess it up, it's all good. Um, so moving on to I know we haven't got much time. So hash rate. Have you got some hash rate? Do you understand the purpose of why having a little bit of hash rate is important to protect BTC and yeah, like the whole mining aspect of things. Have you looked into that at all?
um, yes. So, short answer, no, I don't own any mining equipment, don't have any hash rate. I'm not generating any coins from mining. Am I interested? 100%. So I have a Telegram group that I set up called Bitcoin Mining Australia. That's now a year or so old, and there's
Oh,
people
cool.
talking about Bitcoin mining in there all day long. Um, and that's very cool. So seeing what's being created, and it's only really by digging into Bitcoin mining that you understand the scale of this beast.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's so much infrastructure being built around the world that will ultimately protect Bitcoin from people trying to attack it. And I also think it's a great business opportunity. So right now, the miner's under a lot of pressure. There's some big bankruptcies, a lot of hash rates coming offline. But with that, the difficulty adjustment is going to actually kick into life. So it's quite incredible to watch how it happens. But only by investigating mining do you understand what's going on kind of under the hood. I'd throw into the same basket, actually. I confess I don't run my own node, although I did try to. And the
Right.
reason it's quite simple is I just couldn't figure out how to set up my Umbrel. And then my wife was worrying about EMFs from the Wi-Fi. So we were turning that off at night. And so
Right.
switching off your node every day is just, it's not a
That's a
sustainable
no-go.
process.
No.
Yeah. So um I enjoy delving into these sides of Bitcoin because, until you start picking apart what a node actually is, you don't realize that, God, this thing is crazy, right? So I can have every single transaction that's ever happened on this piece of hardware in my, bedroom for a couple $100. And that, if every single other one in the world got killed, that would still mean the whole thing can run. And it's the
Exactly.
kind of question, oh, government's going to kill it. Try.
Yeah, good luck.
Try and find every single node, mate. Like, you
Yeah.
just couldn't. And that's a really cool part of it. And then the hash rate's it's just like, poof, there is some serious infrastructure being built.
There
Um,
is, and I think like with the hash rate, so I'm mining here. So I've got some home miners. What's the name of the company? Apollo. So the Apollo miners,
okay.
they're low power, low hash rate. So I've got about 14 terahash here. Um, but just in terms of the learning aspect, so like you said, like you really learn a lot just from mining and signing up to a pool, signing up to slush pool, whatever it is,
Yeah.
and then doing all the infrastructure for that, building out, looking at how much power consumption, and then you really think about the macro as well. So it's like, cool, I've got this BTC on whatever it is. So I've got this hardware wallet here. What's actually protecting that? You get like a visual and an understanding of that just from
Mm.
doing it. So I'd highly recommend it. I reckon it's
Okay.
it's really
That's on
worthwhile.
the to-do list then.
Yeah, yeah. I'll send you some links to some like cheap hardware that you can get and you can run at home
Yeah,
like
there's people on
relatively
my
cheaply.
Telegram group pumping around hardware all day long. And
Yeah,
right
yeah.
now, the cost of a miner now is very
So
reasonable.
cheap. Yeah,
I wonder if I
exactly.
could have it set up in my garage in this rental property I'm in.
For
So I haven't
sure.
had anywhere to put it in the past.
So these little guys, like they don't generate that much heat like the big ones do, and they actually run a full node as well. So you can be doing both in one,
Okay.
and they're wireless. So yeah,
Well, maybe
highly
that's
recommend it.
a task for 2023 is to get my head around those subjects, more so
Absolutely. I
than I
think
have so far.
well, you'll dig it. Like it's fun. Like you get into it, and you're like, oh, this is wicked, and
Yeah.
it's akin to like the podcasting. Like when you see there's sats coming in for your podcast, it's kind of magical. It's like the
Yeah.
same thing. So instead of just buying it, you've actually created it in a sense.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's
Cool.
definitely worth doing.
Okay.
So on that note, so you're doing multi-sig, you're doing lightning as well. So like what's getting off zero lightning? So like what's your experience with lightning? You've obviously doing it for the podcast. Have you used it much at all?
I have played around with my Moon wallet and I've sent a few transactions here and there. I haven't used it a huge amount, but yeah, it's just that whole concept. So Nick Bartia's book Layered Money was an excellent kind of synthesis of the history of money and how it actually has always functioned in layers and why it needed to. The fact is you can't necessarily carry gold bullion around in your pocket. It might get stolen off you. You can't split it up enough. So paper money made a lot of sense, but then it's been corrupted over time and fractional reserve banking. And you know that story if you haven't gone down that hole. But um, it's it's just another layer. So this concept of Bitcoin as the base layer and then Lightning on top of it is just a very, very interesting way of thinking about how this is going to be built out. So yes, I've had to play around with it myself. It's incredibly simple to download a Moon wallet and incredibly simple to send some sats to your Moon wallet and send them to someone else. It's just so fucking easy.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no middleman. It's absolutely mind blowing.
It's nuts, isn't
And
it?
then what's cool is you can start digging into, for example, if you look at Lightning Ventures, and if you're interested in early stage equity deals, you can see the deal flow these guys are generating and the kind of companies that are being built. It's quite amazing. So I interviewed Mick Marucci from the Geyser Fund a couple of days ago, and what he's doing is really incredible. And you see how like crowdfunding, for example, it is a model that we're used to here in somewhere like Australia or the UK or the US. But the reality is it functions in very specific regulatory domains. And there are projects that are available to purchase on there, whether it's just a case of, a Kickstarter and you're giving someone some cash to buy their first product of a new item,
Mm,
or you're doing equity crowdfunding, or you're doing debt crowdfunding, whatever it might be. If you're in the Philippines, you can't use that platform. If you're in Nigeria, you can't use that platform. And actually, you suddenly realize there's 8 billion people in the world. And so with the Geyser fund, you can now potentially fund anyone, anywhere in the world for no cost for whatever reason you want using the Lightning
so cool.
Network. And he's
So
trying to
cool.
incentivize people to run their own Lightning nodes. And, in theory, he can actually make some money helping people do that. So Lightning just has an extraordinary potential. And obviously Jack Mallers talks a good game and Strike is an incredible story, but yeah, I could probably do a better job of using it myself. But I like researching about it and looking at, well, what is Bitcoin? Okay, so it's a base layer of money. Okay, well, what's going to get built on it? And when you start digging into the entrepreneurship that's happening right now, it's absolutely mad what's going to happen. And as a Bitcoin holder, you share in the upside of all of these people.
That's right.
This has never happened before. So, if you wanted to hit the real, like, outsized gains. So a guy I followed when I was doing some angel investing is called Jason Calacanis. He has a book called Angel. It's kind of grossly called how to turn 100 grand into 100 million. But actually, he shows you how to do that in his book, which is basically buying very early stage equity positions in Silicon Valley startups. And he hit Uber like fucking
Right.
bang. He made $140 million when Uber
Crazy.
IPO'd from 100 grand investment. Absolutely fucking nuts.
Yeah,
Okay, every single equity position that's being built on top of Bitcoin right now has the potential to reach that kind of size because
exactly.
they're global marketplaces with global products. But the people that own the Bitcoin underneath that can share in that upside, not just the early stage equity investor. And that to me is just a phenomenal like potential value gain, and really exciting.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. There's so much cool stuff being built on top of Lightning as well. Like my favorite, or a few of my favorite apps, Vita.page. I don't know if you've seen that, but
Yep. No, I've
basically
looked at their
it's
pitch just recently. I used it the other
oh,
day.
so
Yeah.
cool. So
Yeah.
it's built on Strike. So anyone who doesn't know, well, like we're doing tutoring over it at the moment, with the Score Bitcoin, and basically, uses Strike. So on the front end, it can be fiat, like a credit card, straight to sats given to you on the other end. So it just transforms it and gives it. It's like a game changer. Like that. That's such a cool app. Like as
Yeah.
soon as I saw it, I'm like, this is like a killer app for the Lightning Network for sure. That was one. A Stack of News is another one. I don't know if you've seen that, but it's basically like Reddit for BTC essentially, and like upvoted with Lightning, and it's just like it's so cool because like the other podcast, actually the other podcast that you're on, Bitcoin Aggregated, we were doing like a news feed, posting stuff every week. And just recently we thought, well, maybe we should swap out to just power it with the stack of news because you can't keep up with it. And the stuff that's on there is just like so quick and coming through, and it's like amazing information all the time.
Yeah.
Um, and that's all with the power of lightning. Like there's so many cool things like being built off that. And I think like, and not only that, just like the cool applications, it's the monetary aspect as well. So like you'd probably remember doing a transaction years ago where you'd have to wait the 10 minutes, and it's like oh, I remember there was a place over in Chadston that accepted Chadston's a big shopping center in Melbourne here, accepted BTC, and this is like early days. I'm like, oh, this is wicked. So I took a bunch of people there, and every time we'd go, like the look of horror would come over the girl's face at the counter. Like, I want to pay in Bitcoin. She didn't know what to do, had to get like the manager or whatever. But you'd still be doing the transaction and like, wait, did it go through? I'm like, yeah, see, it's gone to. I look back and forth. Lightning fixes that immediately. Like you can just do it like at the drop of a hat. So much so that I just bought a second T-shirt actually directly from El Salvador. So my friend Chris is over there. I think he's on his way back now. Straight to the vendor, like on Twitter, just looked at the
Wow.
different T-shirts, and I paid the vendor like over Twitter via Lightning for the second
And
time.
Chris picked it up off him whilst he was at
Yeah,
the store.
yeah, so
Wow.
cool. It's so cool. Yeah, it's like, and that's the future,
And
right?
it's
So
and
you
it's
can,
transactions like that where people go, "Oh, Bitcoin has no value."
Yeah.
It's like, all right, mate,
Yeah,
whatever.
sure. Yeah, sure,
Yeah.
buddy. Now I know we're probably over time, but just one last question. So,
Yeah, go for it. We'll
getting
do one more.
getting off zero edu, so getting off zero education, like, what's your go-to place for educating yourself? And like, obviously you're an avid reader, but to educate yourself and educate other people, like, where do you sort of send them, and
Mm.
where do you read stuff or watch stuff?
Great question. So, um, Twitter is like highly addictive and great fun. So that I use predominantly as an educational tool, but sometimes I get angry and whatever. But
Shit talk
in
tool as
fact,
well.
actually, I don't often get angry on Twitter. What am I talking about? But it's an incredibly useful tool for collecting information
It is, yeah.
and finding sources and getting extra links and digging into holes elsewhere and just generally testing ideas. Like you can, I've been trying a new content strategy in the last maybe week or so, and it's unbelievable how you can have 20 different conversations going on at the same time when you're
Yeah.
not even at the computer.
Yep.
So you can step away from your desktop or your mobile for that matter for 6 hours and you can come back. I posted a tweet. I sold my real estate for Bitcoin. Ask me anything. It's got 2,000 people responded
It's
to it. It's fucking
amazing. Yeah, and
crazy.
you're
Like,
you're really good at that, actually. Like, I've just been following your
oh,
Twitter
thank you.
stream.
I
Like,
appreciate it.
you're really
Well, just in the
pertinent
last week,
questions.
I've really upped it, and it's the response has been incredible. And you don't have to be
Yeah.
right. You just have to be posing questions and asking and like being curious. And
Yeah.
what people give back is so amazing. People want to talk about Bitcoin all day long. You can post at 7 o'clock in the morning, people reply. It's crazy. So Twitter is number one for information source. And Elon Musk taking over the company is something I just didn't even think I'd ever give a shit about, to be honest. But it's
Yeah.
going to change how the world works, frankly. And specifically, Bitcoin is a very anti-authoritarian technology that's going to disrupt central banks. And now that there's a large social media company that's going to be open to discussion, I don't expect us to get censored in the same way as was happening before. And that's very
Mm.
good news. So you should be able to find as much information as you want using Twitter. I have a website called www.bitcoinwithjake, and on there I have a section of listen, read, and watch, which is
Hmm.
a collection of all of the content I've been through to deepen my conviction. So it's podcasts, YouTube, and books, and so you can find everything I've been through there. That's
Ripper.
fairly in depth. I mean, that's literally like 1,000 hours or something now of stuff. Um, Otherwise, there's the really high level kind of things. I also have a podcast myself. So I'm about 50 episodes in now. I talk about people and their personal journeys. So I want to know who they are, where they were in the world, what was interesting about Bitcoin because of what they knew before, and how has it changed their life. And those very high level questions bring out these extraordinary stories over an hour of conversation. So I'd also steer people towards my podcast.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, just basically just stay curious. There's so much information out there that you can go and get that is not impossible to find. You just have to ask questions and it's there. I guess the last point to make is just you cannot trust anyone. So the
Don't trust
information you're
verify.
receiving, yeah, like the don't trust verify concept within the Bitcoin design is incredibly poignant because I spent my whole life thinking central banks were good. I now don't. Why is
Yeah.
that? Because no one ever told me to ask the question, what is a central bank? So it makes you ask a lot of questions. It's actually incredibly unsettling. And there's plenty of my friends that think I've gone completely mad. And that's also very isolating. So that's
Ditto.
again why
Yeah.
Bitcoin Twitter is so useful in these podcasts because we get to hang out and talk about this stuff when no one can tell us not to.
That's right.
So a number of different places basically, but um, yeah, no, that's probably a good summary.
That's awesome, man. No, well done. Like, I have to say, you've done a great in such a short time. You've built up like a great audience, and you're doing like an awesome podcast. And yeah, like, hats off. Well
Thanks very
done.
much, Kieran. Appreciate it.
Very cool. So where's the best? Obviously, your website. What's the best place to get in contact with you? Your
Twitter every
probably
time.
Twitter.
So I've Jake ES Woodhouse on Twitter. Yeah, get in
Beautiful.
touch. I'm more than happy to talk to anyone anytime about anything.
About Bitcoin specifically.
No, well, actually, any subject really, but yeah, get in
But it
touch
always
there.
comes back to Bitcoin, doesn't
It does,
it?
mate. I know I sound like a kind of religious zealot. But
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
in some ways, Bitcoin is religious. I mean, yeah, that's a whole nother conversation.
That's a whole podcast, I think.
Yeah, it
So,
is, mate. No, well, thank
thanks
you
so
very
much.
much, and keep it up, and nice one for going into partnership with Amber, and best of luck building out this podcast as well. I'm sure there's lots of value that you're delivering to people because of it. So it's a very important question to ask, that like, get off zero. How did you get there? What were the steps that you went through? And we're able to teach other people. Like, I'm not perfect. I make mistakes. Very happy to stack my hands up and say, yeah, I didn't always get this right, but here's what I think is going right, and people might value that.
Exactly, exactly. Thanks so much. We'll have to catch up in person sometime soon because we're probably the closer than any other podcast I've done with
Yeah.
people with this.
Well, I'm actually going to the Bitcoin meetup in Collingwood tomorrow night if you're around.
Ah, cool. Tomorrow night. Yeah, I might be able to. I'll see how we go. But
Sure.
I'll check it out. Actually you should join. We do like a tribrid once a month thing online as well. So
Okay.
between Melbourne, Sydney, and Queensland, it's
Like a spaces or
three physical spaces, one VR space, so using
yeah.
a Mozilla Hubs as well, and then Zoom on top of that as well. So
Oh,
I'll
cool.
send you the link to that. So yeah,
Okay.
more than welcome to join.
Well,
But
keep it up, Kieran. Thanks for having me on.
thanks, buddy. We'll talk soon.
Cheers.
Adios.